Hamitakiapi, Leampetu Washte. Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Shirley Snavy. In Northern California, the Yurok Tribe is reclaiming thousands of acres of land along the Klamath River, restoring balance to their homeland and healing generations of loss. Stuart Huntington has the story.
It's easy to hear the river. Now, be still. Can you hear the trees? If you could, you might think they sound happy. It's a safe bet Yurok Tribal Chairman Joe James thinks so.
It's a very beautiful feeling. Makes your heart feel good, makes yourself feel whole.
James is celebrating the transfer in May of the final piece of a massive 47,000-acre return of Yurok ancestral lands along the Klamath River. That comes on the heels in 2024 of the last of 4 major Klamath dams coming down in the largest dam decommissioning in U.S. history. Something remarkable is happening in the territory, especially given that May's land return includes the Blue Creek watershed, a vital cold water cog in the Klamath ecosystem, says Yurok Wildlife Director Tiana Williams-Clausen.
And so Blue Creek is one of the best and clearest and healthiest of tributaries that go into the Klamath River, which is the heart of Yurok country.
When I think of Blue Creek, I think of balanced. Every day, as Indigenous people, as prayer people, we pray for balance in our ceremonies. Blue Creek is a place of balance regarding our salmon, our cold water.
Blue Creek is a place of balance now, yes, but for generations, it and the whole Klamath Basin was dominated by timber companies and power companies grasping resources to feed a voracious consumer society.
It's been under, honestly, destructive management for a very long time.
Yurok Fisheries Manager Barry McCovey Jr. welcomes the new day.
Our strategy goes back to kind of the tenets of kind of who we are as people, and that's we're fix the world, fix the earth people, and our obligation is to restore balance to the world and to the earth. And we've been really pushing hard on a lot of things. We have the capacity now to do this type of work. The dam removal on the Klamath, of course, that was a generational battle. And now we have this on the heels of that, this major landback initiative. It was timberlands, so we want to restore it. We want to return diversity to that landscape and return balance to that landscape. And it all kind of goes back to those core values of that's why we're here, that's our job, and that's what we do. And, it extends beyond that. That ideal extends throughout our lives. And so everyone working in these positions is trying to restore balance to the world, and whether that's restoring streams or revitalizing language or helping our people heal themselves, whatever that work is, it's all moving in a direction of fixing the world and restoring balance.
He never thought he'd see this moment.
In my lifetime, I didn't believe that these type of things could happen as a young person. Only recently have I really come to believe that dam removal happened because it took so long and there were so many ups and downs in that battle that it was tough. And with the timber company and landback here in our ancestral lands, that was hard to believe for me too as a young person.
The land return is the culmination of decades of work with partners including Western Conservancy that led the effort to cobble together some $70 million to purchase the land from Green Diamond Timber Company. Western River's President Nelson Matthews acknowledged the historic moment.
We are incredibly honored and proud of our 23-year relationship with the Yurok Tribe and working on this critical acquisition, which is the largest landback conservation effort in California to this date.
And a milestone in the effort to recenter Indigenous knowledge and focus on balance.
To get access to that piece of our ancestral territory when I was young, you had to break the law. And that's what we did. But now, being able to see a future where myself and my children never have to experience that again. We don't have to be outlaws to exist in our own place, in our own homeland. That's an amazing feeling.
For ICT, I'm Stuart Huntington.
In the Pacific Northwest, a decision by the Trump administration could have devastating consequences for tribes with treaty-protected fishing rights. Daniel Herrera has more.
The Trump administration has just cut funds for the Columbia River Basin. That means cut funds for the protection of salmon and other native fish populations. In the mid-19th century, the U.S. government and several tribal nations in the Pacific Northwest entered into treaties saying that these tribes have a right to harvest on their own reservations. But since then, actions by the federal government, like the construction of dams, severely depleted the fish population. Fast forward to 2023, former President Joe Biden issued a presidential memorandum to restore salmon populations in the Pacific Northwest. The agreement was meant to pour more than $1 billion in new federal investments for wild fish restoration into the Columbia River Basin over the next decade. It also included potentially breaching the Forest Neck River dams to restore natural flows that could revive native salmon populations. And Trump just ended that. He said this is a way to protect the American people from, quote, radical green agenda policies. Brian Bull, senior reporter at Buffalo's Fire, says the administration's move is sure to get litigated.
It's going to go back into the courts, and I think a lot of people are optimistic that eventually the tribes will win out. But it's just a matter of time and patience. And as we've seen, this battle's been going on for at least 20, if not 30 years. People are dug in and they're ready to, fight for their right to keep these salmon populations healthy and running one way or another.
For ICT News, Daniel Herrera Carvajal.
In Oklahoma, Representative Amanda Clinton took her oath of office on June 18th. The Tulsa Democrat won her House seat by a whopping 85%. The district was once a Republican stronghold, like much of Oklahoma. But since 2018, House District 71 has been represented by a Democrat. Clinton is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and hopes to use her position to address a number of issues, including tribal sovereignty.
I know that we have a governor that is very hostile toward tribes, and that has to come down. That heated rhetoric has to come down. So I'm just here to pursue, hopefully better relationships, to educate my colleagues about what tribal sovereignty means. And our tribes are our most overlooked, least appreciated asset in the state.
An art exhibit is bringing the Oceti Sakowin creation stories to life and inspiring conversations and connecting the past to the present. Minneapolis visitors have until July 26 to see an innovative exhibit at All My Relations Gallery. Creation Stories is curated by David Meyer from Okta Lakota Museum and Oglala artist Keith Braveheart. The touring exhibition features an artist talk at each site. Marlena Miles, a Twin Cities artist, and James Starr comes out from Oglala, talked about the creation stories of the Oceti Sakowin.
So this eagle goes flying way up there close to that, and that's where Shkun, the movement is that protects us. So the eagle goes very close to that, and he absorbs the power of Shkun, the sky. So it goes inside these eagle feathers. So when he comes back, and when we use these feathers, that's where we're getting the power of the sky, Machbia, up there. So that's why the eagle feather is very sacred and important to us, because of the power the healing power that we receive from that.
Yeah, I just created to honor just like the role of women and the way they homicize us as Mikoda. So for FIFO, and then at the 13 rooms are also 30 Chifiko for praise. When you're living in a teepee, you're Biden Miver.
Each artist puts their sichun into everything that they create. So with that piece, the feelings, when I was creating that, and the experiences in my life, or the energy is put in it. So whenever anything that I create too, a lot of the feedback, when they see my work, the audience will share to me, I had this feeling. This is what I feeling I get from that when I'm around that. So that's where, so I truly believe that we as artists give a part of us inner to bring that healing, because of art is within our heart, and that's where we put into what we create, and from there the energy goes out. So that's what I truly believe. it's a healing power that we have.
A lot of our trauma comes from colonization and it's all its different forms. And people talk about decolonization. I really don't know what that means, but when I think about like indigenous or re-indigenizing your mind or reconnecting, all humans are supposed to be indigenous to this planet, but indigenous people are the ones we see who see the land as a relative. So I think the more you learn about your culture, and we're both like the Oceti Sakowin, so we can learn about our culture together and we share it together. The more you do that, the more that colonization trauma can kind of leave and be replaced with the ways that guarded our ancestor society and gave them power and healing and also strength and empowerment. So I feel like a lot of positive things come to your human spirit when you connect. And artists, we're trying to share that with other people so that they leave feeling in a better space, hopefully.
For ICT from the homeland of the Dakota Oyate, I'm Shirley Snavy.
Ganabachwi Menogishiga Noongam. Perhaps today will be a good day. Ganabachwi Menogishiga Noongam. The word Ganabach is talking about maybe or perhaps. We is a future tense. Minnow talking about something good. And Gishiga means day. And then our word Noongam is today. Putting it all together. Ganabachwi Menogishiga Noongam. Perhaps today will be a good day.
After Don Phillips was killed in the Amazon, his colleagues completed the book he died writing, a book which centers Indigenous knowledge and global responsibility.
How to Save the Amazon by Don Phillips and contributors has just come out in the United States. Don Phillips set out to write this book in order to find ways to save the Amazon and the indigenous people who inhabit it. Tragically, Dom and his travel companion, Bruno Pereira, were murdered while searching for answers. In the aftermath, a group of writers took up Dom's partially completed manuscript and committed to finishing it. I'm joined by Andrew Fishman and Tom Phillips, some of the contributors of the book. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Tom, the chapter you worked on is called Regrow and Self-Protect, Indigenous Defenders. Can you talk to me about what the chapter entails?
I was really happy with the chapter that I was selected to write for a couple of reasons. One, the Indigenous activists who I had met during the 10-day search for Dom and Bruno in 2022, it allowed me to go and spend a lot more time with them and to sort of follow through on Dom's reporting on that group and to see how they were growing their work in their territory, the Javali Valley, and around Brazil, and indeed around South and Latin America. And there was a sort of natural connection between the reporting that Dom had done in the Yanomami territory, which is the biggest Indigenous territory in Brazil, in 2018, 2019, and the reporting that I had done on it slightly before that and then slightly after that. So I was able to kind of mesh together his vision for his chapter and the reporting he'd done in that part of Brazil.
Andrew, your chapter is Shaking the Global Money Tree. What's that one about?
So I wrote the chapter on international finance and international financing, so both philanthropy and international funding of commercial activities that are contributing to the destruction of the Amazon. So this was a chapter that I knew from my talks with Dom that he was the least set on. He wasn't really sure how he was going to handle it because it's very big and it can be very technical and there's a lot of ways you can go. I ended up going to the COP28 conference in Dubai because it just felt like the perfect encapsulation of all of these contradictions that exist. You have this massive climate conference being held by a major oil and gas producer who's trying to prevent the end of oil and gas production. You have the beginning of the Lula government taking back from Bolsonaro, campaigning on these promises of ending the deforestation and being an environmental hero and changing the way that the Bolsonaro government did it. But in the first months of the administration, you start to see that there's a lot of policies that they're doing that aren't really living up to their promises, including pushing to drill for oil in the Amazon. And just right now, there's a massive piece of legislation that is getting rid of environmental checks before you could do large projects, and they're not even pushing back against it. So, the Lula government's there. You have all these Amazonian activists and indigenous activists that are there trying to make their case. And then at the same time, you're seeing it butting up against the reality of the largest number of lobbyists for major industries there in the history of COP. And so it's this moment where you see why things are so difficult. One thing I'd like to say is that when you think about the Amazon, imagine you're using a zoom photo lens, and if you zoom in at a certain aperture, then everything, it's all really clear and it makes sense. This is so easy. We can solve this. You just have to do this one thing. And then you zoom into a different focal length, and suddenly it's all very complex and very challenging. And so what was interesting about this chapter was being able to take that big zoom out and go to away from the Amazon after the whole book is taking place in the Amazon, and look at the people who are often, have the most power, or could have the most power to prevent the devastations happening, because they're the ones with the money behind a lot of these operations.
What do you hope readers will take away from the book?
I mean, I hope that readers understand that this title, How to Save the Amazon, is an invitation to ask that question, to care about that question, because it is one of the most important and consequential questions in the world right now. So, Dom went about this book. That title was not supposed to be, I am going to step in there and I'm going to answer and solve all the problems. It was, the original subtitle was Ask Those Who Know. He had spent a decade traveling around the Amazon, meeting people that were destroying it, and people that were trying to save it, and people that were, somewhere in the middle there. And he felt that there were already the seeds of what needed to happen taking place in different stages all over the place. And those people were not getting the attention that they deserved.
Dom was famed for a few different things here, but one of them, and I think what made him such a great journalist, was that he was such a good listener. And he was interested in listening to all kinds of people from all walks of life. One of the ironies, terrible ironies of what happened in 2022 is that the people who are accused of killing him are actually the kind of people that Dom would have sat down around a wooden table and tried to understand. The chapter I wrote, and going through his notebooks, I found conversations that he had in the Yanomami Indigenous Territory with illegal gold miners, with people who ran illegal businesses within the Indigenous territories, and he didn't judge them. He just wanted to listen to them and to understand why they were there, what they were doing, and what that told us about the situation. But I think I think few of the books I have about the Amazon here give you such a powerful human telling from so many different remote places that most Brazilians even have frankly never heard of.
Andrew and Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our Two-Spirit relatives have always been part of our communities. This Pride Month, we hear how visibility and traditional roles help restore that honor. Amelia Schaefer has this interview with Angel Geller, who works with the Society of Care, a project of the Santee Dakota.
Thank you for joining me on the ICT Newscast.
Thank you for having me.
So do you work a lot with Two-Spirit people?
I do. A lot of our youth that I work with now identify as being two-spirited or somewhere on their journey of finding out. And so our youth group has been really active in wanting to be visible and show up for a two-spirited community because it's something that hits home for a lot of them. I find that more recently, their mental health is a lot more affected by the paranoia that comes with ICE, of whether or not being recognized as Indigenous people on their own lands. But yeah, in the past years, we've had conversations about just kind of the different things that they've seen and experienced, and it's definitely something in a red state where I'm sure other people have experienced kind of similar things where it's just very aggressive, especially in the legislature.
What do you think that communities can do to help Two-Spirit relatives feel more welcomed?
Acknowledging them. I remember like going to counseling for the first time, and I even told my counselor, I was like, it's something that I'm not quite sure if I'm safe here unless you explicitly say you are safe here. And so I think sometimes like keeping that at the forefront, that like a lot of our relatives, they don't know whether or not they're going to be safe being exactly who they are. And so, if you're visible about celebrating them and teaching history that includes them, and remembering them in prayers when you're talking about people who are really vulnerable, needing a little bit more attention from Wakanda, like I think those are moments where just bringing them up and remembering that they exist and that we don't want to forget them.
I was just at a Two-Spirit powwow here in Rapid City last weekend, and one thing that one of the elders spoke about was how Two-Spirit people had traditional roles in, for example, Lakota culture.
Come with the compassion. The old ways are what was beat out of our ancestors at the boarding school, and so we're just trying to get people together to be happy and not have foul language and not have jealousies or resentments, and just have a good time. Get out there and have a good time.
I think two-spirited powwows are just ways where they can be visible and celebrated. Like that's different. A lot of times, I hear from folks that they like you're living on a day-to-day basis where you're not sure if you're going to get attacked or, if someday you could get murdered or something like that, just based on stats. So it's scary. Nebraska's only been a state for like 157 or 8 years, but for thousands of years before that, queer people existed here and they had, a really beautiful role in their community. So really kind of updating their concept of Indigenous history too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So just those events in general where they can engage with the community and they can feel seen, you would say that those are a big help?
Definitely. And helping them accept and understand something maybe that they're not as exposed to. That way, when they are exposed to it, they're not just repeating or seeing it through like the same narrative. Because, that might be traditional values for some folk, but not for us. Traditional values like our relatives are all very sacred, and we want them to be here and we want them to be themselves.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on the newscast.
Of course. Yes. Thank you for asking.
Language ties us to our traditional homelands and lifeways. In Minnesota, young adults learn about sacred places and a troubled history.
We refer to this larger area as Dakuwakantipi. Dakuwakantipi. Daku is like something or a thing. Waka means like sacred, spiritual, mysterious, holy. It doesn't really have a good translation into English. And then tipi is like the house of or the dwelling of. So this area we call Dakuwakantipi. It's the dwelling of something sacred.
A dozen language learners gathered near Bedote to learn from Professor Darlene St. Clair. Not only did these college students learn Dakota words for these sacred sites, they learned about history. Brett King is from Red Lake.
I think it'll bring healing, because we still feel the intergenerational trauma to this day. For years, as a teenager, I struggled with an identity crisis, trying to figure out who I was or where I fit into society. And then after I start educating myself about the history of my people, that's when I found my healing and my identity. And now I try to learn as much as I can about the language and the culture. I sing on the big drum now, and it's just, I really try to stay in the culture.
Raul Aguilar is the Indigenous Language Institute Executive Director.
It's the first year that we're hosting it. We're grant funded by the San Manuel Band of Mission Indian Southern California. And we are doing our Dakota Sacred Sites Tour with Darlene St. Clair. And we are wanting to make sure that the students get a land and language experience.
Michelle Capo is a student from Ecuador.
I hope these kind of events can be more often, so more indigenous peoples or native or tribals here can come and learn, because I think this is a really good opportunity to empower youth.
The philosophy that we want to make sure is that we're speaking our languages. Languages are dying out right now at a faster rate than most people are realizing, and in each community they're facing their own challenges within the languages. So what we're trying to do is to foster the next generation of language learners. So working with those college age students right now that tend to be that forgotten generation is what we talk about. Most folks are investing into our youth and like grade school, younger generation, and then an elder retention area. So we're looking at those areas that we're not investing in.
For ICT from the homeland of the Dakota Oyate, I'm Shirley Snavy. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.